When the school bus rolled over, 23 children were trapped inside. The fire department would arrive in 15 minutes. The children couldn't wait that long. The woman her neighbors thought was just a housewife was already taking action. But let's go back to the beginning. In Linda Carter's kitchen drawer lay an old photograph, one of the first female paramedics to work for the Chicago Fire Department's elite emergency medical services. 8 years ago, after a traumatic incident, she had left everything behind and become a quiet suburban housewife in the peaceful town of Millbrook, Connecticut. At 45 years old, Linda had gentle features and warm hazel eyes that always seemed to notice when someone wasn't feeling well. Her auburn hair was usually pulled back in a casual bun, and she favored comfortable cardigans and practical flats. She moved through her daily routines with quiet efficiency, but there was always something purposeful about her movements. The way she automatically checked her watch every few minutes, or how her eyes instinctively scanned for potential hazards wherever she went. Every morning at 7 a.m., Linda would wave goodbye to her husband Michael as he left for his accounting firm, then begin her daily routine. She'd tend to her garden, which neighbors always complimented for its precise organization, prepare meals with nutrition labels she read more carefully than most people, and volunteer at various community events with a helpfulness that struck people as unusually competent. Michael often encouraged her to do more with her life. "You're so good with people, Lynn. Maybe you could go back to nursing school." He had no idea that his wife already had more medical training than most nurses, or that the career she'd never had was the reason she woke up screaming some nights. Maple Street was the kind of suburban neighborhood where everyone knew everyone's business. Linda had lived there for 8 years, and her neighbors saw her as the helpful woman who always brought the best dishes to potluck dinners, never missed a community meeting, and somehow always knew exactly what to do in small emergencies. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman next door, often relied on Linda when she felt dizzy or short of breath. "You have such a calming presence, dear," she'd say. "You should have been a nurse." The young mothers in the neighborhood appreciated Linda's inexplicable ability to handle childhood injuries. When little Tommy Peterson fell off his bike and scraped his knee badly, Linda had appeared with a first aid kit that seemed unusually well stocked. When Jenny Walsh's daughter had an allergic reaction at a birthday party, Linda had somehow known exactly what questions to ask and what steps to take until the paramedics arrived. "She's just naturally nurturing," the other wives would say. "Some people are born to take care of others." The neighborhood kids gravitated toward Linda's house, drawn by her gentle manner and her uncanny ability to make any hurt feel better. She always had ice packs in her freezer, bandages in her purse, and a way of staying calm that made frightened children stop crying. Subtle signs of Linda's background emerged for those who knew what to look for. Her medicine cabinet was organized like a small pharmacy, with everything labeled by expiration date and purpose. She kept a surprisingly comprehensive first aid kit in her car, her purse, and her kitchen. Kits that went far beyond basic Band-Aids and antiseptic. When the community held CPR training classes last spring, the instructor had been amazed by Linda's form. "Have you done this before?" he'd asked. Linda had just smiled and said she'd taken a class once. Most telling was her reaction to medical emergencies. While others panicked or stood frozen, Linda moved with practiced efficiency. She had an uncanny ability to assess injuries at a glance, and her questions during emergencies sounded almost like a medical interview. "When did it start? Rate the pain from 1 to 10. Any allergies to medications?" Last winter, when the mailman collapsed from chest pains in front of her house, Linda had been at his side in seconds, checking his pulse, loosening his collar, and asking specific questions about his symptoms that impressed even the paramedics when they arrived. "Ma'am, are you in the medical field?" one had asked. Linda had quietly shaken her head. Thursday, October 12th started like any other day. Linda was pruning her rose bushes when she heard the horrible sound of screeching brakes, followed by a tremendous crash. She looked up to see that the Millbrook Elementary School bus had skidded on wet leaves and rolled over on its side, blocking the intersection of Maple Street and Oak Avenue. The sound that followed was worse than the crash itself, the screaming and crying of 23 children trapped inside the overturned bus. Some voices were calling for help, others were eerily quiet. Within seconds, other neighbors began emerging from their houses, most standing in shock or pulling out their phones to call 911. Linda could hear Mrs. Patterson on her phone. "Yes, it's the school bus. It's flipped over. How long until the fire department gets here? 15 minutes? Oh my God!" Linda felt something shift inside her chest, a familiar rush of adrenaline and focus that she hadn't experienced in 8 years. Without conscious thought, she began running toward her house, her mind automatically shifting into emergency assessment mode. School bus, approximately 23 children ages 5 through 12. Possible injuries ranging from minor cuts to serious trauma. Emergency services 15 minutes out. Immediate triage and stabilization needed. Linda burst through her front door and went straight to the hall closet where she kept her emergency supplies, what Michael thought was just an overly comprehensive first aid kit. She grabbed the large medical bag, a smaller trauma kit, and a flashlight, then ran back toward the accident scene. By the time she reached the bus, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered, but no one was doing anything useful. Some were trying to look through the windows, others were shouting reassurances to the children, but everyone seemed afraid to actually touch the vehicle. "Stand back," Linda called out with an authority that made everyone turn to look at her. For the first time in 8 years, her voice carried the commanding tone of someone trained to take control in emergencies. She approached the bus systematically, first walking around the entire vehicle to assess the overall situation. The bus was stable, resting on its side against a large oak tree. She could hear children crying and calling for help from inside. "My name is Linda," she called through the windows in a calm, professional voice. "I'm here to help you. I need everyone to stay exactly where you are right now. Do not try to move until I tell you. Can everyone hear me?" A chorus of young voices responded. "Yes, help us. I'm scared. My arm hurts." Linda pulled on medical gloves from her bag, a motion so automatic that she didn't realize how strange it looked to her neighbors, and began her assessment of how to safely access the children. As Linda worked to find a safe entry point into the bus, muscle memory took over. Paramedic Linda Carter, Chicago Fire Department Emergency Medical Services. 8 years of high-pressure urban emergency response. She had worked some of the worst scenes imaginable. Multi-car accidents on the Dan Ryan Expressway, building collapses, mass casualty incidents that made the evening news. She had been one of the most respected paramedics in the department, known for her ability to stay calm under pressure and make critical decisions that saved lives. Her partner, Jake Morrison, used to joke that Linda could triage a disaster scene faster than most people could order coffee. But that had been before the warehouse fire, before the incident that ended her career and sent her running to the quiet suburbs where nothing terrible was supposed to happen. She had thought she could leave that life behind, that she could be satisfied with garden parties and book clubs, and pretending that her most important skill was making casseroles. Standing next to this overturned school bus, looking at scared children who needed her help, Linda realized that some things you can't run away from, and maybe shouldn't. Linda found her entry point, a partially open emergency exit window on the side of the bus that was now facing up. She climbed onto the bus with the agility of someone who had spent years maneuvering in difficult spaces. Then, carefully lowered herself inside. The scene inside was controlled chaos. Most of the children were conscious and moving, which was a good sign. She could see immediately that while there were various cuts, bruises, and what appeared to be a few broken bones, there didn't seem to be any life-threatening injuries visible. "Okay, everyone," Linda said in her professional voice, "I'm a trained medical professional, and I'm going to help all of you. First, I need to check each of you for injuries. Then we're going to get you out of here safely." Through the windows, she could hear her neighbors talking. Did she just say she's a medical professional? What is Linda doing in there? How does she know how to do this? Linda worked with systematic efficiency, moving from child to child, performing rapid but thorough assessments. What's your name, sweetheart? Where does it hurt? Can you wiggle your fingers for me? How about your toes? When she reached 7-year-old Emma Walsh, who was unconscious with what appeared to be a head injury, Linda's training kicked into high gear. She carefully stabilized Emma's neck, checked her pupils and breathing, and called up to the gathering crowd outside. "I need someone to call 911 back and tell them we have a potential head injury. Tell them we need advanced life support, not just basic transport." The specificity of her request, combined with the medical terminology, made the watching neighbors realize that their quiet housewife knew exactly what she was doing. What happened next would be talked about in Millbrook for years. Linda Carter transformed from suburban housewife to commanding emergency responder, coordinating the rescue of 23 children with a competence that left the gathering crowd speechless. She organized the evacuation by injury severity, walking wounded first, then children with minor injuries who needed assistance. Finally, the more serious cases who required careful extraction. She directed neighbors to help but gave specific instructions. "Mrs. Henderson, I need you to talk to Sarah here and keep her calm while I splint her arm. Mr. Peterson, help me support Tommy's leg while we lift him up to the window." When the fire department and paramedics finally arrived, they found that Linda had already triaged all 23 children, provided initial treatment for the more serious injuries, and had them organized for efficient transport to the hospital. "Ma'am," the fire chief said as he climbed into the bus, "this is incredible work. What's your medical background?" "Paramedic," Linda replied simply. "Chicago Fire Department, 8 years." The lead paramedic, reviewing Linda's work, shook his head in amazement. "Ma'am, you probably saved that little girl's life. That head injury could have been critical if you hadn't stabilized her neck and monitored her breathing." By the time all the children were safely transported to Hartford Hospital, Linda Carter was no longer just the helpful neighbor. She was the woman who had single-handedly managed a mass casualty incident with 0 fatalities and optimal outcomes for all victims. 6 months later, Linda Carter sits in her new office at Hartford Hospital, where she works as the head of emergency medical training. The job came with a personal request from the hospital administrator after the school bus incident made regional news as a textbook example of proper emergency response. On her desk, next to the old photograph of her Chicago Fire Department graduation, sits a new picture. All 23 children from the school bus, healthy and smiling, gathered around Linda at a community appreciation ceremony. In the center of the photo, wearing her new Hartford Hospital ID badge instead of her gardening clothes, stands Linda Carter, no longer hiding who she really was. Her husband, Michael, stops by her office every day after work, still amazed by the transformation. 8 years, he always says. 8 years you made casseroles and organized book clubs, and I never knew you could save lives. Linda just smiles. She has learned that running from trauma doesn't heal it, but using your skills to help others can transform it into something meaningful. The garden still gets tended, the community events still get organized, but now Linda Carter does these things as someone who has remembered that her greatest gift isn't making others comfortable, it's making them safe. And sometimes the person organizing the neighborhood bake sale might just be the person who will save your child's life. Like this story? Hit the like button and subscribe for more inspiring tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Who is the hidden hero in your neighborhood?